Hi everyone, my name is Sally Fowler. I'm the owner and trainer for Disabled Advantage Dog Training. Today I'm going to be sharing a presentation that I did recently for a CRPS group and that I would like to be able to share with others who are interested in learning about how service dogs can help someone with CRPS and how even training a dog for being your pet dog, being your companion can benefit your life with CRPS for the better. So I'm going to be sharing a presentation I made that focuses on the hope that comes from working with a dog and to illustrate that my own personal journey with my life before CRPS, how I got into training service dogs, and what Disabled Advantage does currently. And I wanted to focus this presentation on the hope side of things more so than specifically facts about service dogs or information about exactly how service dogs help with CRPS, because I've put out a lot of content about those topics, and I'm going to keep putting out information about those topics. And if you sign up for a starter session with me, that's something that we're going to cover in depth, particular to your needs. But the thing that I see over and over again happening with my own clients who have CRPS and start training a dog with me, as well as what I know happened in my own self, is that whether you're training a service dog or a pet dog, the hope for a better future with CRPS and a better quality of life with CRPS kicks in for us long before a dog ever starts learning task training. And that's what I want to focus on today. A little bit about me before I jump too far in. I have been training animals for over 15 years. I started out training horses, initially riding and then learning how to train behavioral problems in horses and focusing a lot on studying how to train horses, horse behavior, and anything else I could possibly learn about. And then I switched over to dog training and repeated that process as well with furthering my education in dog training for the purpose of training my first service dog and then, of course, launching Disabled Advantage. I currently rely on a service dog for mobility assistance and CRPS. I have full body CRPS type 1 and type 2, so that impacts my ability to do basic daily tasks, take care of myself, and move around safely. I do have trouble walking some days, but I'm not able to use traditional mobility aids like a wheelchair or a walker or a scooter or crutches because of my limited range of motion, how my other conditions impact me, how the CRPS impacts me, and because we live in an extremely rural area. So there aren't sidewalks where I live. There's grass, there's pasture, there's gravel, and there's blacktop with giant farming equipment tearing down it and pickup trucks and people blasting down the highway. And our house is not built to be accessible. And so even if it was possible for me to use those tools, I would almost never be able to use them, just because of how we're situated in my daily life. I'm currently working with my second service dog. I started training my first service dog about 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now. And he retired in 2021 and passed away in 2022. Both of my dogs came from shelters, which surprises a lot of people. I'm partial to shelter dogs because of my experiences working with them, as well as my clients' dogs who've started with shelter dogs. I know a lot of people do like to start with puppies for training service dogs, and there is logic behind it, and it's good logic. But I personally didn't have the energy at the time to work with a puppy. I still don't really have the energy to work with a puppy. Um, and starting with a puppy is quite a gamble. It can also be really expensive on the front end. And that's something I'm happy to talk more about in another video or in a one-on-one if somebody has questions about puppy versus older dog. But it is something I've done blog posts about on Robbie's blog, and am working on doing it on Disabled Advantage's blog as well. I live with, as I said, complex regional pain syndrome, full body, type 1 and type 2. I have confirmed nerve damage in my right shoulder and my right knee, and very possibly in my left jaw. Following surgery, I had extended nerve issues there that weren't there before, and I've since developed trigeminal neuralgia in the left side of my face. I also have TMJ disorder. That one came along before the CRPS, and trisomy X syndrome, which is another way of saying triple X syndrome, which means that I was born with 3X chromosomes. It doesn't do anything major to me. Like, if you look at me, you wouldn't know that I have a chromosomal disorder, but it does give me hypermobility. Not to the extent of something like EDS, but my ligaments and tendons move more than they're supposed to, and my muscles can move out of place, which feels weird. And I do occasionally have subluxations and dislocations as a result. Before CRPS, I was a avid photographer. My dad was a professional photographer in journalism, and he taught me everything that he knew about photography and how to take good photos. I gravitated more towards nature and horse photography and dog photography because I had a dog at the time and she was my best friend. So I took a lot of photos of her. Um, but the photo here of the bee on the lavender flower is one of my absolute favorite photos because this photo was taken before I had fancy equipment, before I had years of experience under my belt. And it was the first time I remember getting the settings right and having the lighting right and being able to get something as small as a bee in focus and have it look this good. So this is a photo that I was instantly proud of and made me want to work really hard at being a photographer so I could keep doing stuff like this. And it's still a photo to this day that I'm really proud of. When I wasn't taking photos, I was either at home reading a book. I was one of those people who couldn't put a book down. I would read a book while I made meals. I would read a book in the shower. It's possible. You have to get creative, but it is possible to keep the book dry, mostly. Um, I loved reading, and it wasn't just I liked reading fiction, but I was also constantly reading books about horse training and horse care, methodology, history of horses, encyclopedias, behavior, body language, stuff like that. And the other gaps were writing. So my ideal day was getting up, going to the barn first thing in the morning, and staying at the barn until 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening, and spending the whole day grooming horses, cleaning stalls, cleaning tack, reading in the pasture, riding horses and training horses and helping with the training of horses. And I loved being at the barn, doing anything I possibly could. I loved working hard and I didn't want it to stop. And I also didn't shy away from other aspects of hard work. I enjoyed hand washing my truck. I enjoyed mowing the lawn. And it anything where I could be working hard and being outside was something that I wanted to do. I wasn't very athletic. I wasn't into sports other than riding horses. Um, but riding horses and photography took up most of my life. And so when I was ready to go to college, I lived in North Carolina. That's where I grew up, but one of the best horse schools in the country was located in central Missouri. And that is where I wanted to go to college. So I moved from North Carolina about 900 miles away to Missouri to attend a 4-year college where I would further my experience and knowledge on training horses. They had a very expansive program where I would learn how to ride all of the different seats and um, be responsible for taking care of horses, including things like, showing up to farrier appointments or having to sit with a horse at 2 o'clock in the morning because they were sick. And the idea of that really appealed to me. That's how intense my desire to be in the horse industry was and to be a horse trainer was. This is Bud. This was a project horse that I was assigned my first semester at college to train through a behavioral problem he'd started having. I was about a month and a half into the semester when I started riding Bud. He, at the college, we had a mix of equestrian students who were experienced with riding and were there to grow on their experience. And then we also had people who were relatively new to the equestrian industry and were there to start from scratch and build up their experience level that way. And I was having a hard time learning a new style of riding. And so my teacher assigned me project horses because then my focus would be on the project horse and not on, oh, am I holding the reins right? Am I sitting right? Because then I would just get two in my head. And Bud was having an issue where he would run away with the less experienced riders. And so my assignment was to work with him in class and outside of class and work with him on getting him to stop, getting him to pay more attention to the rider, staying connected to the rider, and trying to get him to a place where he would stop pulling this stunt on people who didn't feel safe on him. But he was a very strong horse, and he had the ability to. There's a maneuver where you're supposed to be able to pull a horse's head around to their butt, and in theory, they're not supposed to be able to run while they're curled up. But Bud was able to keep moving forward for a little while, even while in that maneuver, um, because he was so strong. And there was one day on October 27th, 2010, that he bolted with me in class. And I did the rein maneuver that I was supposed to do. But at the time, we didn't know that I was hypermobile. And the amount of strength and force that it took to turn his head back and stop him, I had to hold my arm and twist it behind my back, and it went too far and held for too long. And when it happened, I felt a really sharp pop in my wrist. I felt heat run through my arm. The pain was excruciating, but I held it until he stopped and I got him under control. We had no way of knowing at the time that I had stretched my arm too far, and also that my collarbone rearranged itself. It's now permanently flipped or twisted and pressing on nerves in my right shoulder. Because the pain was in my wrist, I assumed and told doctors that the problem was in my wrist. Um, Being any sane horse person, I ignored the pain and kept riding, and then finished my ride and went about my life on campus. I was 18 when this happened. I did not have a doctor in Missouri. I only had the campus nurse. But after a few days, maybe a week, my pain was still there, and it was really, really intense pain. It felt like fire, and there were times where my hand would swell up and turn yellow, which was weird, and it would turn purple and grayish. I had one night where it went super, super cold for 4 hours, and we had gloves and hand warmers and blankets and heat packs, and it still just was super cold. And it took a really long time for it to return to normal temperature. And it was at that point that one of my friends was like, "Hey, I think you need to go see the campus nurse because this is weird." And I went to her and she diagnosed me with minor nerve damage that would go away in 6 to 8 weeks and advised me to brace it and ice it, which I later learned that ice was really bad for CRPS. Um, but at the time, none of us knew that, and so that's what I did. Over the next 5 years, I stayed in college for 4 years, which was the plan. I didn't want to give up on college. And honestly, only one person in my life floated the idea of leaving college. And when they brought it up, my answer was, well, I don't know what I would do instead. Like, at least at college, I'm doing something and I'm learning something. I don't know if I can work a job with this. We don't know what's going on. And I don't want to we had put a lot of money into college. I didn't want to give up on that. So I stayed in college. I was able to switch my major from um, the equestrian degree that required writing into an equestrian degree that did not require writing, but would allow me to continue taking classes on training, teaching lessons, and things like that. But I did have to stop riding horses, which was devastating. And in order to maintain one of my scholarships for work study on campus, I switched over to shooting sports for the marketing department and found out that I was really good at shooting baseball. And so for the next few years at college, I teamed up with the baseball team on campus and did all of their photography for scholarship and also because I really enjoyed it. Shooting baseball and getting in with the team helped keep me grounded and focused on following through on my classwork and being able to graduate college. During this time with the CRPS, we didn't know it was CRPS. I did get an initial diagnosis of RSD within the first 8 months. But the neurologist who was looking at me said, this looks like RSD, but that's very rare. So there's no way that that's what you have. This has to be something else. And at the time, I didn't think much of it, so I didn't do my own research. He tried a battery of um, nerve medication, and none of them really worked. Eventually, one of them worked enough to where I did actually have remission for a little bit that first summer. But then when I returned to college and started doing strength training to get myself back in shape, and regained some range of motion, the CRPS came back with a fury and also started spreading, and the pain got worse. Over this course of time, I had 14 different tests and scans. All of them came back normal. Nothing showed that anything was wrong. At some point, we did have some scans of my shoulder done, but um, they didn't show enough to show that there was anything structurally wrong with my shoulder. I saw 23 different types of I saw 23 different medical professionals, various types, rheumatology, neurology, ortho, physical therapists, acupuncture, chiropractor. I saw people in North Carolina and I saw people in Missouri, and nobody was able to give me a definitive answer. Near my junior year, I was once again diagnosed with CRPS. I was assured that there was a cure, and then that diagnosis was revoked when I did 3 months of hand physical therapy and didn't get better. They said that because I didn't get better, that was proof that I didn't actually have CRPS and that it must be something else. So once again, I was thrown into the darkness with zero hope or understanding. And we were calling it an injury. So I know now that on that day that I rode Bud, I was disabled. The second that injury happened, I was disabled. But at that time, it never occurred to me that I was disabled. I just thought I had a weird injury for 5 years, which looking back on it sounds silly, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I was a college kid. I was just trying to get through college and figure out the next step. And my hand was annoying and a mystery and a source of great pain in many different ways. I because we didn't know exactly what it was, I couldn't really ask my college for accommodations, or I didn't even think that it was possible to ask for accommodations. And so I had teachers who mandated that I still turn in handwritten assignments and handwritten tests. I had teachers who wouldn't let me take notes in class with a computer. I had teachers who actively bullied me about the pain if I did ask for, hey, can I use my computer to take notes? I had friends who bullied me about the pain, friends who suggested that I just treat it like a stub toe and put it out of my mind, or who outright called me a coward for not being able to handle a little bit of pain. Because in the horse world, it's pain is expected. And so for me as a horse professional to say I couldn't handle the pain was not met with any degree of sympathy or empathy. And my family didn't believe me either. Um, and that was really difficult as well. I had no support system. And that was 4 years of college and then 1 year after college. And by the time I graduated college, I did graduate college, but the CRPS took the baseball away. I became unable to hold a camera for more than 30 minutes, and the quality of my photos went down drastically. More and more photos were blurry because of how much my arms were shaking. At this point, I'd also been getting ice from the athletic department, and so I became accustomed to strapping really big bags of ice on my wrist, my shoulder, and my rib cage routinely because the pain was so bad. Um, Once we learned that ice was really bad for this condition, we stopped doing that when I got the second diagnosis of CRPS, but the damage was probably already done. And then that diagnosis was revoked and we were in the dark again. Um, that year after college, I wasn't able to work a job because it was getting harder and harder for me to work at a computer or I couldn't lift anything over 50 pounds. A lot of the job requirements that are listed on interviews, I wasn't capable of doing anymore. Um, and I became a husk of the person that I used to be. I wasn't doing photography. I wasn't riding or training horses. I wasn't around the few friends that I did have at college. I had my boyfriend, but that was about it. I had a few long distance friends, but they're not the same as people who, come bang on your dorm room door and say, "Hey, I know you feel like crap, but we're going to a dining hall and you're going to come with us." Um, and I wasn't even really reading because it hurt to hold a book, or it hurt to touch the pages of a book, or it hurt to hold my computer, or it hurt to read things. And so I was just this completely different person. The CRPS scooped out the Sally and just left something different, who laid on the couch all day watching TV and hating the world and looking out the window wishing for what was supposed to be my life and hating people who were able to go do things. Um, and I was living with my boyfriend at the time, which was really helpful. But it also added to my emotional turmoil because I wasn't able to help in any way. So a lot of times I felt like a burden, even though he didn't make me feel that way. Just my own brain convinced me that I was a burden and that I was worthless because of how much pain I was in. And the no answers problem. Um, and at one point, my husband or my boyfriend, he's now my husband, my boyfriend sat me down and was like, "Okay, look, we need to try and find something for you to do because you need something to hold on to keep you going. So let's look back into photography. Is there a way we can get you back into photography so that you just have something? Maybe you're able to make a little bit of income from it, but we need to find an adaptation that makes it possible for you to do photography with the amount of pain that you're in and the other symptoms you're having." And at this point, the pain was also like when it started, when I first got the CRPS, it would hang out around like a 5 out of 10 and would kind of go up and down. Five was its lowest, and then it would go higher. And by this point, um, I was closer to the 8, 9, 10 end of the spectrum. And constantly, my mental idea of what high pain was kept getting moved because the pain just kept getting worse. So he had a very unique idea. And he said to me one night, "What if we got you a service llama?" And it was a ridiculous idea because, first of all, there is no such thing as service llamas. I want to be really clear about that. Under federal law in the US, service llamas are not a thing. Service dogs are a thing, and miniature horses are a thing, but not llamas. Llamas can be therapy animals where they go provide comfort to other people, but they are not service llamas. So that's not a real thing. But his rationale behind it was, "No, no, listen to me. We can strap a camera to its neck, and its neck is more upright than a horse, so you can ride the llama, and then you won't have pain from walking, and you won't have to hold your arms up on your own. You can just kind of lean on the neck and hold the camera and take photos, and it'll solve a lot of the problems. And then you also have this unique thing so that you're more catchy and you can get back into photography." And it wasn't a serious conversation. It was 100% one of those out of the box, silly conversations you have with the person you love. But it got us thinking about service dogs. And that was a real conversation. We got to thinking about, okay, so I don't have a diagnosis. We don't know what's wrong with me. We're pretty sure this counts as a disability, but we had looked into getting me disability assistance and I didn't qualify because I didn't have enough work experience. And we did go talk to a disability lawyer. We looked at every possible avenue and I didn't qualify. Even though I had worked all through high school, I worked at the barn for basically pennies or free riding lessons. And so I didn't have proof that I worked a job. When I was in college, I worked baseball internships, which didn't add up to enough work hours. And so, and even though technically I was disabled before the age of 26, I didn't live with my parents, and my dad wasn't willing to accept me as an adult disabled child. I might be getting some of the exact terminology wrong, but basically, we looked real hard and I didn't qualify for disability assistance. But all the research we were doing on service dogs said that we didn't have to be able to prove like we didn't have to be on disability to get a service dog. We just needed to have a disability, and we were fairly confident that I was disabled at this point. We didn't know by what, but I was disabled. And so we started looking into a service dog and we started mapping out like how a service dog would help me. And the biggest things we could think of were a dog who could carry my photography equipment, which isn't anything excessive. It would have been possible for a dog to carry it, and helping me sit on the ground to take photos and stand up after taking photos and possibly help me walk and possibly like lean on the dog a little bit while I took photos. And so we started doing research. Luckily, since I didn't have a job, I had plenty of time to do a lot of research. But you'll notice there's a very small number here next to the word programs. Initially, my research told me to look into service dog programs, which are organizations who raise puppies with the help of volunteers, and then trainers train them obedience, socialization, public access, and task training. And they usually have various programs focus on a specific set of tasks for specific disabilities. Somewhere in this mix, I did finally get re-diagnosed with CRPS for the third and final time. And this doctor was familiar with CRPS. He had several other patients with CRPS, and he was extremely confident in the diagnosis. So he's who diagnosed me with type 1 and type 2. But um, he wasn't able to really give me any treatment that we hadn't already tried. So um, I started looking at programs and I couldn't find any programs that train dogs for CRPS. And when I tried to explain CRPS to people, their immediate reaction was that I sounded incapable of taking care of a dog because of how much pain I was in and how limited my mobility was. I tried looking into programs that train dogs for things like MS because I had looked up the symptoms of MS, wondering if that was what I had. It wasn't, but it sounded similar enough to CRPS that I figured a lot of the tasks would cross over. But the programs we were looking at that would work with where I'm located in the country was a problem as well. I don't live in a big city. I don't even really live near a big city. And most programs do have service areas. The programs that would work with where I am, I would have to travel to them for several weeks to learn how to work with the dog and make sure it was a good pairing, which is, first of all, extremely understandable. Getting a service dog is like getting a, high-powered, fancy performance car. You do need to learn how to drive it properly. Um, But that type of thing was going to be too big of a financial burden on us. It wasn't something we could afford. There were programs that were free, and then there were programs that went all the way up to $40,000. And they wanted you to be able to fundraise, and that just wasn't realistic for us. And across the board, none of the programs we looked at trained the tasks that we knew I needed, like bracing and stability work. They also had a lot of weird, not really weird's the wrong word, but they also had a lot of stipulations. I was more likely to find a program that only worked with children and veterans than a program who worked with just regular adults, which was frustrating. Um, and they had really long wait lists. So out of like, I probably did look at a lot of programs, but there were four that I narrowed my list down to. And of those four, incapable, too expensive, didn't train what I needed, and had long wait lists. Like it'll take a year for anybody to look at your application. And then after that, it's going to be another 2 to 5 years before we place you with a dog. And the reason for that is because it takes 1 to 2 years to train every single dog. And each program only has so many volunteers. But in my situation, I didn't have a static disability. I had a disability that we knew was progressing rapidly and was just getting worse. And we had no idea what I was going to be like in 5 years. So we didn't know how to say what I needed from a dog because we couldn't predict the future with CRPS. So when the program search got exhausted, we switched our focus to, well, why can't we just take your horse training, read up on dog training, and then apply the horse training to dog training? And once I looked into that, there are a lot of similarities. And so I was able to take all that experience and all that knowledge and transfer it over to training dogs. I read a lot of books, I took some online courses, and we also decided that it would be a good idea for me to work with a private trainer in person for starting my first service dog, just to make sure we didn't miss anything and to help us understand what type of dog we were looking for. There are not a lot of private trainers in Missouri who have experience with working dogs. Um, at least there weren't 11 years ago. And out of the 5 names that I wrote down to call, only one of those people called me back. And I was initially disheartened when I talked to him because he said that he was actually retired and just hadn't taken down his website yet. But when I got to talking with him and explained that I rode horses and what my situation was, he said that he would take me on as his one last client because he knew horse people and horse people worked hard. And the only type of client he was willing to work with was someone who would work hard and take it seriously. And so he did take me on. Um, it took us 6 months to find a dog to adopt. We were looking at the shelter system and rescues in the state. We also looked at puppies for parole in Missouri. And it took us 6 months because there were a lot of dogs to sort through, and at looking for a potential service dog in the shelter and the rescue system is like looking for a unicorn. The dog has to have a very specific set of characteristics, and it can't be too old, because if it's too old, meaning older than 18 months old, you have to then deal with potentially 2 years of training and learning that this dog has had. You have to deprogram that. And you also shorten the dog's working career because it does take 1 to 2 years to train the dog. So we were looking for something, because I knew I didn't have the energy for a puppy. I was looking for a dog between 6 months and like 14 months old And with the right characteristics, the right size for someone who's 5'10" and had the makeup for being a service dog, and that was a really tall ask. We also dealt with a little bit of trouble from shelters and rescues. A lot of shelters have a 4-foot fence rule because that's how they believe is the best way to keep a dog safe at home. And because we live in the country, we don't have a fenced in yard. Our plan was to just keep the dog on leash until it learned off leash reliability. But anytime I tried to explain that to people, they thought I meant a tie out cable where the dog was going to be ignored. And we were immediately stamped with not approved. I also ran into trouble with people still thinking that because I had a pain disorder and because I had a disability, I wouldn't be capable of taking care of a dog. And, or there were people, unfortunately, who believed that I would intentionally hurt a dog so that I wouldn't be alone in the pain that I was feeling, which was sickening to hear from people. I looked at probably over 150 potential dogs, and eventually I found the dog. So I had one trainer, one potential dog, and finally I had a spark of hope. Robbie was the dog that brought about the hope and the change. He was enrolled in Missouri's Puppies for Parole program because he had been returned to the shelter twice. So he'd been adopted and returned twice. And both times he was returned for being too stubborn, too energetic, and too destructive. He liked to eat chain link fences and chairs out from underneath people when he was bored. And he was labeled as a Labrador. But when we saw this photo of him on the right was his ad photo. And when we saw this photo, me and my husband both looked at him and went, yeah, that's not a Labrador. Um, but that was actually good because labs are a little too small for me to work with. We adopted him in February of 2015. And he met about 75 to 80% of our criteria list. Because he was enrolled in the Puppies for Parole program, his offender handlers were able to tell us a lot of really good information about him that your average shelter worker wouldn't have had on him. He needed a home where he was going to be given a job, and we were able to give that to him. Now, when I work with clients, if a Robbie comes across my list of potential dogs from a client, I usually try to steer them away from Robbies. He was the exact right dog for me because I needed a project. And I also needed to learn how to transfer my horse training into dog training. Um, but typically, when we want to start a service dog, having a project is not necessarily a good idea because training a service dog is its own project. Um, but I had the time, I had the determination, and it turned out to be exactly what both of us needed. When I was training Robbie, I thought I was just training him. So our trainer gave us a list of commands to train, showed us how to do it, and then sent us home to do it ourselves. And I spent more time working with Robbie and hanging out with Robbie than I spent with my husband in those 10 years. Um, or in those 8 years. Um, and at this time, I was still very raw from the CRPS. I had hope because we were finally moving in the direction of something. At this point, where we were with the medical treatment of CRPS was that I had 3 different medical professionals tell me that there was nothing more the medical community could do for me, that there was no hope for me, that the CRPS at this point had spread almost completely full body. Training Robbie helped push it the rest of the way. Um, but at this point, I kept being told a lot of the common treatments for CRPS had a very low success chance with me, and they were very, very expensive. And so we weren't willing to take the gamble on like 99% chance won't work on you and the expense of it. Or I was told that I had already exhausted things. So we'd already tried all the nerve medications and they either didn't work or they gave me severe side effects that I could not live with. Um, and I also didn't have anyone who was willing to prescribe me any type of pain management. So when I started training Robbie, I had nothing. I had no nerve medication. I had no pain medication. I was just on my own in the dark trying to figure this out. And the trainer I was working with was empathetic to a point, but he was a my way or the highway kind of trainer. And so he pushed me really, really hard. And it was both good for me and not so great for me. Um, but also Robbie pushed me because he was stubborn and he was challenging and he wanted to do things his way and he'd gotten away with a lot of stuff in his former lives. And at that time, I was starting to work with a mental health professional who was teaching me cognitive behavioral therapy, but it was not sticking. It was not going well. Um, and I was really resistant to a lot of the let the thought just float by like a cloud. And I um I was so mad at the world and I was so mad at the pain. And when something would happen with the CRPS, when it would flare up, when I would drop a cup from tremors, I would just either break down or just yell because I was so mad at myself for being a burden, for being in pain, for being useless, for being worthless, and not being able to do anything right. And I was so used to dealing with the CRPS from a place of anger. But when you train with an animal, anger doesn't get you real far. You have to be able to take your emotion, take your pain, and kind of put it off to the side a little bit in order to figure out how to build a bridge of communication with your animal. And okay, here's where we are, and here's where I want to be, and how do I get there? And so I thought I was just training a dog how to be a service dog and also less of a jerk. But what was really happening was that every single time I worked with Robbie, what he needed from me and what was the most successful for training him taught me how to function with CRPS and how to live with and process the CRPS when it flared up and at its base level in a way that then worked really well with talking with a therapist. Um, so those things were happening side by side, but I attribute the bulk of the success to training Robbie because it shifted my focus and it gave me, I was focused on him and accomplishing the problem more so than I was focused on, you know, doing stuff for the CRPS because also at this point I was just done with the CRPS doing everything. Robbie, training Robbie and working with him and having him in my life gave me a quality of life that multiple medical professionals told me was never going to be possible. When I used to fill out quality of life scales, I would usually score myself at like a 2 or a 3. And even before Robbie started learning how to do tasks for me, just having to go out and train him and work with him every day brought my quality of life higher up on the scale because it was really easy with the CRPS to say, oh, I don't want to get up because I'm finally comfortable, or I'm in a lot of pain. I'm not going to get up. And one of my sticking points pre Robbie was I'm not going to walk. I'm not going to exercise. It's just going to hurt. I'm probably going to fall down and it's not going to help anything. So there's no point in doing it. And also, bit of valid concern there. Where we live, if I do fall down, there's a really good chance no one would notice. And I have fallen down before out here, and most people don't stop, which is another thing. So, and where we live, we don't really have neighbors, so we don't know anyone. Also, it's a problem. Um, but when I got Robbie and when I voiced these concerns to my trainer, he was basically like, yeah, I don't care. Robbie needs to learn stuff, so you're gonna do it. Um, and it was incredibly helpful. It was hard, but it was incredibly helpful and it was exactly what I needed. So it became less about I should get up and move because it's good for the CRPS. And it shifted into, well, Robbie needs to learn heel to be able to help me walk and prevent falls. And he needs to learn leash manners so that he's less of a jerk and that he's safer for me to handle. So I have to walk him because that's the only way he's going to learn these skills. Initially, these walks started out as I'm going to walk a quarter of a mile, call my husband. I'm in a lot of pain. He'd come out, pick us up, and drive us home. So I was only walking Robbie on days that my husband, was off work. Um, Over time, though, the more I walked, the stronger my muscles got, and the more my brain learned that I was capable of walking. I was capable of doing all of these things that I convinced myself weren't safe or were too painful or that I just wasn't capable of doing. And a quarter of a mile turned into half a mile and then a mile. And my regular walks with Robbie ended up being between half a mile and a mile for the first year of training him. By the second year of working with Robbie, at some point, I remember stopping and thinking, holy crap, we just did a 2 mile walk and I don't feel that terrible. This is amazing. And so then walking him also became an escape. If I felt trapped or overwhelmed or stressed out, I could get Robbie, I could get his leash, and it was like going for a ride. I could just go walk Robbie, and together we were okay. And everything felt okay. It was still painful to walk. It was still hard to walk. There were days where I was really wobbly or days where I couldn't go the distance I wanted to go. But it was an effort and it was something to always keep working on and always keep working towards. And he learned heel, he learned leash manners, which helped him eventually learn how to help me walk. One of the other things that was a big change for me was that prior to getting Robbie, I spent a lot of time in bed because I was in so much pain. There were very few things that I actually got accomplished during the day. Um, and Robbie needed a lot of socialization training. He needed to go out to public areas. I usually avoided going to public spaces because they were loud and they hurt and there was a lot of walking and I didn't want to be around people and really grumpy all the time. But Robbie needed socialization training, so I made it happen. And I went to places with my husband and at the time my mother-in-law would take me and drop me off places for training. And I went to these places and I dealt with the pain and I dealt with the attention from the public and I got the job done because what mattered was teaching Robbie how to be the dog that I needed him to be so that he could help me with my disability. And this is where owner training especially is super, super hard because you have to sometimes take your disability, put it in a box, train your dog, and then wear whatever side effects your disability gives you as a consequence later on. But it has to happen for you to be able to train your dog how to help you later. Um, but the work that I did with Robbie went beyond just going on walks and going out socialization places. I was able to go on dates with my husband. I was able to go out with friends when they were in town. And it became a little bit easier to be in certain types of places. And when we weren't training together, we were being silly. We were playing in the yard. We were playing in the house. He liked agility. So that was a fun thing that we did together. He was amazing at jumping and absolutely gorgeous. And I started taking photos again of Robbie. So I have thousands of photos of Robbie, but I was becoming me again. I was coming alive again. And the hope that that brought me was so incredible. And before Robbie, I hated the word hope. I hated that word. And living with him and training him, hope had an entirely new meaning for me. Once he started learning tasks to help with my disability, his assistance stabilized my pain levels and my other symptoms, gave me a way to manage flares better in the moment than what I had had before, because what I had before was nothing. And he made me feel safe with the CRPS. So my flare fear is still a little bit there, but it's much, much lower than what it used to be. And the way I see the world changed from, I don't think I can do that, to I'm going to give it a shot. And also, I wonder if the dog can help me do that. Robbie learned how to open doors, which we knew was a really consistent pain trigger for me. He also learned how to pull a firewood cart to help us pick up firewood from the field to load it on a trailer, and also to bring the firewood cart into the house. That one is a little bit of a weird task for a service dog to do, but we rely on wood heat to keep our house warm in the winter. And there were times where my husband was sick or injured and wasn't able to bring firewood into the house. And in that time, we knew that I would need a way to bring firewood into the house without relying on having to always call a family member to come over and bring 80 pounds of wood into the house. Robbie was able to bring 80 pounds of wood into the house in multiple small trips. There was still an impact on me because I needed to pick up the pieces to put it into his cart, take it out of his cart, and stack it. But my husband learned how to cut pieces of wood that I could manage without being ridiculously small. And we also discovered that it was an alternative form of exercise for me that helped fuel my soul because it was hard work outside. I felt useful. I didn't feel like a burden. I was contributing to our household, and Robbie was fulfilling something that did become a very real need. He also learned how to help with laundry, which you see in two of these photos. He was able to help me strip the bed and change the sheets, which was a huge benefit because it took one thing off my husband's plate. And it also made me more self-sufficient during the day if I was able to do my own laundry. And Robbie did help with pretty much every step of the process. He would pull clothes out of the hamper, sort it into a basket, pull that basket to the laundry room, hand me things to put in the washer, get things out of the dryer, pull the basket back to our bedroom, and then bring me clothes to fold. And that did take him a while to learn, but once he learned it, laundry used to be horribly exhausting and extremely painful for me. Like if I did laundry, I was then in bed for the rest of the day, kind of pain hit. But with Robbie helping with laundry, that flare didn't happen. A little flare happened where I would need to rest after doing it with him, but that rest cycle looked more like 30 minutes to an hour, not the rest of the day is in bed. He also helped pick up items. He would bring me my shoes. He would pick up things that I dropped from hand trimmers. He did learn how to carry my camera in a pack on his back for when we went on fun walks together. And he did learn in this far right lower corner photo, he's bracing, where I would put my hand on his shoulders. He learned to stand a very particular way, and he would get me off the ground when I fell. He would get me off the ground when I chose to sit on the ground, although I quickly learned that that actually made him very upset because he learned very quickly that me being on the ground was not okay. And he also prevented falls. He learned how to tell when I was about to fall based on leg tremors or how I was moving and walking. And so he would anticipate that and stop a fall from happening. And he also helped me walk across uneven terrain like creek beds and up and down hills and stairs. Taking the elevator causes really bad vertigo and nausea for me, and so stairs are actually better for me to take, but they're more of a fall risk. So having a service dog help me take those made it safer and healthier for me. All of these things did something that the medical community was not able to do for me. My pain at this point was just a resting 8 out of 10. And it was very common for me to have beyond extreme levels of pain. I never go to the ER because I've been turned away before, and so we just don't go. We write it out. But I used to have just severe, super, super severe pain every single day. Stay in bed all day kind of pain. And Robbie got me to where his tasks and the additional work we did together got me to where my pain stayed at a very manageable level every single day. And on the days where it did spike up, his assistance made it possible for me to stay safe while I recovered or keep doing things, but do things in a safer way because I had his assistance doing it. We also found that him helping me was actually more gentle on my body than a person helping me. So a person helping me walk would actually cause flares, whereas him helping me walk didn't cause flares. A person helping me off the ground caused flares. Him helping me off the ground didn't cause flares. And so that was cool to see as well. Early in the process of training Robbie, I was very paranoid about the owner training process. The amount of legal research I had done taught me that it was legal, but I also saw a fair number of YouTube videos of people getting harassed over, is your dog legit or is it a fake service dog? And so I wanted to, if anything ever went wrong, if I was ever, questioned about his legitimacy, I wanted to be able to prove without a doubt that this dog had been very thoroughly trained to be a service animal. I have multiple training binders of detailed notes that I kept on his training. And I also started a Facebook page and this blog to help track his training progress, problems I had, how I resolved it, how I trained tasks, and just kind of keep a really solid record of it. It also became a hobby that I could do in the downtime when he was resting in between training. And initially, when I set out training Robbie, I was just focused on my hope and myself and getting myself to a better place. I loved working with Robbie. I loved training him. And through my CRPS service dog site, I found that I really enjoyed helping other people as well, and that I was good at it across a keyboard. I started getting in questions and emails and messages from people saying, hey, I'm having this problem. I joined a few dog training groups on Facebook and I would answer people's questions and write in the comments and offer suggestions. And the advice that I was giving worked, it was helpful, it was beneficial, and at this point, there was still no one training dogs for CRPS. And so this connected me to other people with CRPS, and it also helped me realize that I had potential. I had something that I could give, not only the CRPS community, but something that I could give to my life beyond just what Robbie brought. And that was indeed being a service dog trainer. And so from CRPS service dog started the idea for Disabled Advantage in 2017. Um, Part of it too was that I was starting to get more and more in-depth questions from people that bordered on the kind of help a dog trainer would give. Um, and I was still unable to work a job, but starting my own business and finding a way that I would be able to do it with my disability and with my pain made it possible for me to make an income. So the idea for Disabled Advantage was formed. I started taking more online dog training courses to further my own education and read as much as I possibly could. I also had a few coaching sessions with other dog trainers to get their advice and their input. And overwhelmingly, most of them wanted me to just get the ball rolling and jump in feet first and, change stuff and make it up as I go. But I really didn't like that idea because I wanted to be able to give my clients the highest quality of training possible. I knew that with my own condition, there were going to be days where I was training in a higher state of pain or a higher state of brain fog or both. And I wanted to be sure that I always got the training right, that I wasn't misleading people. And so another thing that is really that changes with service dog training from pet dog training is that service dog training has a lot of elements to it that need to be layered and zippered together just right so that the dog builds on its skills to create a high level working performance animal at the end. And that has to be done a very particular way and a very particular order of events. And so I spent 4 years writing lesson plans and then also writing adaptations to those lesson plans. So thinking about how would I change this if somebody used a wheelchair? How would I change this if somebody was in a walker? How would I change this if somebody couldn't use their arm or couldn't do something that I'm able to do? And come up with certain things that like I knew I wouldn't be able to offer people or certain deal breakers on disability limitations, as hard as that is to have to tell someone. Um, but when you own or train a dog, you kind of have to be, disabled enough to need a service dog, but not so disabled that you can't train the dog. And it's a really weird fine line to walk. And I wanted to make sure that I understood all of that really well and had a plan. And also work out having an online classroom where my clients could go watch videos because I knew that I would be working with clients who also had brain fog and would need ways to remember what we did in a lesson and practice it on their own. And setting all of that up while also dealing with my pain ended up taking 4 years. So Disabled Advantage didn't officially open until 2021. It did coincide with the pandemic a little bit. I teach clients through one-on-one Zoom sessions. And so a lot of people assume that I came up with that plan because of the pandemic. I came up with that plan way before the pandemic happened because I needed a way to work with clients anywhere in the US and Canada. Because I can't drive and I needed a way to work with clients anywhere, but also meet them where they were at with their disability so that a lot of the training could be done in their house or in their yard or at a nearby park that's like 2 minutes away. And training through virtual setting was that solution. I've been in business for 5 years now. I've had several clients, but specifically, I've had 6 CRPS clients and 14 client dogs. I've worked with shelter dogs, puppies, older dogs, dogs who started out as fosters and then became permanent dogs that stayed in the home. And I've made over 1,000 teaching videos to help people learn both on my free YouTube channel and also in that private classroom I have for clients. It takes me 1 to 2 years to train each service dog team. So when I work with a client, I'm working with that client for 1 to 2 years. I do have one client who I've been working with for about 3 years, and that's because her first dog washed out of training due to a medical reason, and we had to start over. And so I helped her find her replacement dog, helped her sort out deciding to retire and rehome the first dog, and then starting training over again. And that is a hard reality of owner training. But it was something that I was there for every step of the way. A lot of private trainers are going to pitch, oh, we have an 8 week session, or I do a 2 month board and train. And that's not the case with me. When I work with a client, I'm in it for the long haul, start to finish, or meeting you in the middle. If you've got half the training done, or you only need help with little things, that's what we'll do. But most of my clients are start to finish. They come to me either with a dog or needing help finding a dog. And I help teach them through live lessons for the entire duration of training the dog, and with the allowance of occasionally they're going to have flare setbacks or medical setbacks. So how does a service dog specifically help with CRPS? I talked about it a little bit with Robbie, but I want to be really clear how I explain this, because the idea of a dynamic disability service dog is becoming a lot more popular, which is awesome. But a lot of the traditional service dog books, if you read them, some of them express a notion that if the disabled handler can technically do something, then they aren't disabled and they don't need a dog to do it. And it's not a real task. And that's not true with CRPS, because a lot of people with CRPS, most people with CRPS who I've met, are super stubborn. So we'll usually do the thing and then accept the pain consequence. And then we'll do the thing again. We know we're capable of doing the thing, or we'll at least try it because we don't have another choice or because we're so stubborn. But it has very dangerous at times and very real consequences. So it used to be for me, opening a door equaled falling because the pain was so severe. For me and for other people with CRPS, that is a real need. So, one of the ways that a service dog can help with CRPS is prevent. They prevent flares. If you're able to map out specific triggers in your life that you know consistently cause flares, and they're things we can control, like opening and closing doors, we can control that. A thunderstorm, we can't control, but that's something your dog can assist with during and help you recover from safely afterwards. But things we can prevent: opening doors, falling when we get in and out of the shower, falling while we're getting dressed, falling from bending over. Those are things the dog can prevent. So if a dog can be trained to open and close a door, turn a door handle, push a button, brace while we're getting dressed, brace while we get in and out of the shower or the tub, they're preventing flares from happening. And every time they prevent a flare or a trauma from happening, they're keeping our pain levels more stable. They're keeping our symptom levels more stable. And then we have more of a reserve of energy and more of a reserve of pain tolerance for other things in our day. And those things stack up very, very quickly. So the more ways your dog helps you, the better managed your condition becomes. The second way they help is they assist during a flare. In this photo, I was standing in a really long line to meet someone that I really wanted to meet. And There were no chairs. The line was moving at one of those really annoying paces where, like, as soon as if you did have a chair, as soon as you sit down, the line moves. And so I was forcing myself to stay standing. But it was at the end of a very long day. I was flaring real hard and I was having severe leg tremors to where I needed to hold on to Austin in order to remain standing. And even then, I was barely standing. Um, right now in this photo, he's doing something called counterbalance. That is where I pull up on a handle as I start to lean to the left or fall forward or backwards. And every time I pick up on the handle, he's been trained to lean into his harness, and that helps pull me back to center and keep me upright. So not only was he helping me remain standing, but he was helping me walk up in the line. Other ways a service dog might help with a CRPS during the flare is getting medication, pulling a blanket up on you, pulling a blanket off of you, bringing you something you need from your flare kit, bringing you your flare kit, finding a human to help you, laying on you to do deep pressure therapy or deep cold assist therapy, where the dog lays on you to help stabilize your body temperature during a cold flare, putting their head or paws on you to stop your hands from shaking, and other things like that. A lot of these tasks cross over with each other because CRPS moves so quickly throughout the day, but they all work together in concert. After a flare, we're usually weaker, which means we're more prone to another flare popping up or to a trauma happening, like spraying or running into a wall, falling over, things like that. And so the more we ask our dogs to help us while we're weak, we prevent the possibility of a second flare or a second trauma happening to us. Or even if it does happen, it's a little bit of a smaller one than a massive one. And so this can be done in this photo. Robbie's bracing while I get dressed. That just ensures that in my weakened state, I don't fall over while I'm getting dressed. Even if most days I can get dressed without bracing on my dog, if I've just had a bad flare or I'm coming out of a bad flare, I will brace on my dog to make sure I'm extra safe. Other things are bringing us objects we need, deep pressure therapy, deep cold therapy. After I have an adrenaline episode, I usually get very, very cold. And so I'll have Austin lay on me to keep me warm and stabilize me so I don't slip into low-level shock flare, which happens for me. And these are the three core ways that a service dog helps manage a disability with CRPS. But what about just training your dog? If you have CRPS and you own a dog, I strongly encourage you to train them to some degree. They don't need to be a fancy dog. They don't need to be a performance dog. They don't need to be a sport dog, but they do need to be gentle. They need to be aware of you. They need to be respectful of your space. They need to have basic manners because in most dog homes, even healthy owners, I can almost guarantee there is something going on in your relationship with your dog, in your dog's skill set, whatever. Your dog is probably doing something that is stressing you out, and you may not be aware of it. Or you might be aware of it and you have no idea how to fix it. When we have CRPS, stress equals pain, but also there's so many things that dogs do just by being dogs, like running past you quickly or jumping up at you, headbutting you, paw striking you, licking you obsessively, running up to you and leaning against you, things that are just accepted universally as dog that are painful for us with CRPS. And so if you live with a dog who's doing any of those things and a lot of other things that you may not be aware of, they're causing flares. And so if you can train your dog, and especially if you work with a trainer like me who's going to see the things that your dog is doing that's causing pain that you're not aware of, you can limit the number of flares you're having in a day just by training your dog. And that alone can be a huge impact on your life. You also teach your dog to be super gentle with you, how to have a certain energy around you, how to change their energy when they move from one person to you. Um, and that does make a very real impact on your life. The other way that it helps you is that it shifts your focus. So back to what I was talking about with Robbie at the beginning, I didn't want to do the cognitive behavioral therapy. I didn't want to do exercise. I didn't think anything was worthwhile. But when I switched my focus from myself to my dog, that stuff fell into place and happened anyways. Um, Focusing on your dog makes it easier for a lot of people because it becomes, if it's about us, often it just feels like work. And we're so tired of being chronic illness life that it does get exhausting being in this world sometimes. And when we focus on our dog, we're not focused on, I have to do this because I have to learn how to hold my body properly. It's, I'm doing agility with Austin and I'm working on his balance, and I need to stand a certain way and hold my hand a certain way so that he does the exercise correctly. And so doing little agility, doing games with your dog, doing walks, all of that stuff gets you up, gets you moving, gets you focused on your dog, and inadvertently gets you working on yourself from a mental and emotional standpoint, as well as a physical one, without putting as much pressure on yourself because you're just focused on doing it with your dog instead. And the other thing is that it helps you develop a routine. Routines feel impossible with CRPS because of how unpredictable CRPS is. But dogs thrive on routine. A lot of dogs who have behavioral issues because they have no routine in their life. They have no routine, they have no structure, they have no rules, no boundaries, etc. And when we develop rules, boundaries, structure, routine for our dogs, it also kind of forces us into a bit of a routine. And what I usually recommend people come up with is ideal routine and then skeleton routine. And the skeleton routine is you're having a really bad pain day. What's the bare minimum that your dog needs? And then let's stick to that so that your dog's needs get taken care of. And then we sandwich it with self-care. And everybody ends up doing a routine, and it will help with your overall management of CRPS because it also gives you a better idea of if you are better in the morning versus the afternoon, or if you're better at the beginning of the week versus the end of the week, and things like that that help you make choices in other areas of your life with CRPS. One of my clients gave me this phrase this week, and I asked her if I could borrow it for this presentation. And she said yes. So think of it as a routine of self-care, dog care, repeat. You have large chunks of self-care where you're taking care of your CRPS and your life. You have small chunks of 2 to 5 minutes, not giant chunks, not 45 minutes, not an hour. Like if you can do that, great. But most of the time, 2 to 5 minutes of let's wait at the door, let's practice waiting for treats, let's just follow with me through the house, let's practice place, let's practice manners, etc. And then sandwiching it with more self-care. And the more you do this, everything starts to fall into place, not only for your management of your CRPS, but also your life with your dog. So what does Disabled Advantage specifically do? I have various courses for people who want to own or train a service dog and for people who just want to do pet dog training. I also have single sessions where you can do CRPS coaching if you're newly diagnosed, talk through if a service dog is even a good fit for you, or get help with specific training problems in just 1 or 2 sessions. Or if you have a service dog and you're wanting to learn a task, you can sign up for sessions where we just focus on teaching tasks to your dog. All of this is done online through one-on-one private Zoom sessions. I don't do group training. Everything that I do is just based on the individual so that I can give highly customized training to people. When I work with a service dog client, it usually takes 1 to 2 years. When I work with a pet client, it's more like 3 to 6 months, depending on what kind of training they need. I also help people find a dog where they are. So I do online research and attend virtual meet and greets to help be sure that people are taking home the right dog for them. A lot of people inadvertently pick the wrong dog for their lifestyle or what they're hoping to be able to do with the dog. And that goes with service dog training and it goes with pet dog life. A lot of people think that just like any dog will do, but for service dog training, you're looking for a unicorn. And for pet dog training, even if you don't have CRPS, your lifestyle matters and your personality and your temperament matter. And so not every dog is a good fit for every person. Some dogs need a very specific type of person to take them home and work with them. I also have free advice videos on YouTube. I'm working on a new series where I focus on specific manners or skills that you can teach a dog and why it matters for CRPS and chronic pain specifically of why does it matter to teach this to my dog? The first one I did was doorway manners for why teaching your dog to wait at doorways or even give doorways just a really wide berth can help lower and prevent flares for you in your day-to-day life with pain. So I'm working on building up that series as well. I also do CRPS service dog education stuff. Last year, I was able to attend RSDSA's conference in Texas as an exhibitor to talk about CRPS service dogs and hand out information on them. I attend talks when people invite me. I've done one to a local Girl Scout troop where they asked questions about service dogs and got to see a demonstration of Austin performing tasks. And usually it's based on when people invite me and ask me to do it, but it is something that I'm looking to do more of when the opportunity presents. These are some of the faces of the dogs I have worked with through Disabled Advantage, and you can see it's an array of puppies, pure breeds, mixed dogs, shelter dogs, big dogs, and small dogs. All of the training is customized to the individual. I do focus on clients with CRPS, but I also work with people who don't have CRPS as well. Thank you for watching this presentation about hope through dog training and a brief intro into what CRPS service dogs can do and how they can change your life with CRPS. If you have any questions, you can send me a message through my social media platforms. I'm on Instagram and Facebook with the handle @DisabledAdvantage. And I also have a booking site through my website. My website also has access to a YouTube page, clips from client sessions so you can see what it's like to work with me, client testimonials, and free resources, PDFs you can download, and also links to additional information on service dogs to help further your own research and education. Thank you for watching.